So in general, the purpose of diagnostic test accuracy reviews is to try to systematically and thoroughly review all the literature on a diagnostic test so that clinicians can be better informed as to how useful that test is in their own clinical setting. So we want to review a wide range of different tests. That's pen and paper tests like the Mini Mental State Examination or the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, through to brain imaging scans like SPECT scans, and see how useful they are in different settings, whether that's the community as a whole, primary care or secondary care. In general, and in this study, diagnostic test accuracy reviews are searching a wide range of sources. So we look at not just the more easy to find literature through traditional databases like PubMed and Embase, but also the grey literature, that is literature that's partially published. So for example, PhD theses or conference abstracts and presentations. It is very often the case, and indeed it was the case in this review, that we identify tens of thousands of possible citations, of which perhaps only a few, 10 or at most perhaps 100, might have data that's actually relevant to the research question that we are seeking to answer. For this diagnostic test accuracy review, we decided to use the approach of crowdscreening. So we hypothesized that trained reviewers who had no specialist expertise in the area that the review was examining might be able to screen some of the initial citations so that we could go from 50,000 possible citations to perhaps 2,000 or 3,000, which could then be further examined by more specialist or senior reviewers. And that would make the review possible to conduct in a reasonable time frame. As part of the crowdscreening program, we recruited people who might be interested in participating in this review from the local region. So we asked local psychology trainees and trainee clinicians and invited them to a regional training day.
During that afternoon, we went through various different papers that had already been pulled up from the initial search, and we allocated them into different groups, whether we thought they should definitely be included in the study, possibly be included in the study, or definitely not included. After that afternoon training session, I felt well equipped to go away and start the process.
A possible problem with this method is that non-expert reviewers might exclude a study that is in fact relevant to the review question.
During the afternoon training session, we were encouraged to be quite over-inclusive so that we would minimise the risk of losing an important paper.
To try and provide a double check on this, all 50,000 citations were divided into two halves, and then each batch of 1,000 citations was read twice.
I found that after looking at the first 1,000 papers that I had been quite over-inclusive.
Any study which was included by one reviewer was included in the possibly relevant category. We believed that by having a second reviewer, even if they were non-expert, reviewing every abstract, it would minimise the possibility of excluding possibly relevant articles. We are anticipating that we will probably find around 100 to 150 total papers that are relevant and provide usable data for this review. So while we aim and are hoping and doing everything we can to include all the relevant articles for this review, if we miss one it's unlikely to change the results significantly. So I think there's been a number of strengths to this design. Importantly, we've managed to engage a lot of people who might not otherwise have been involved in this type of research, and I think that's a really important advantage for doing it this way. We've managed to get a lot of trainee young clinicians involved with the process of conducting a Cochrane review, and I think that's great.
I think it's been really useful being exposed to so many different types of research paper and being able to identify what is a good paper and what isn't.
We've also managed to go through a large number of citations which would not have been possible with a traditional approach. With any research study, there's always the balance between the perfect study and the pragmatic study. And I think here we've tried to steer a line between those two areas. We've put some safety checks or methodological checks in place, and we've trained the non-expert reviewers. And that means that this review can actually get done. From the beginning, we've had the privilege and the fortune of working very closely with a highly expert, very experienced systematic reviewer. And I think one of the key messages to take from this work is that crowdsourcing should only be approached with expert guidance. This is not something to try at home. I suppose the hypothetical perfect review would be that it was conducted by people who were expert in the clinical area and were also expert systematic reviewers. But those people are few and far between, and it would take a very long time. I think here we have an answer that can be credible and has been conducted in a rigorous way.
And if you were to